So tonight we're going to be doing a really different target. It's going to be a HA RGB image. So how does that kind of differ from what I've done before? Stick around and you'll see. First thing I got to do is obviously take off the tarp here, and we're going to go ahead and load up the big 10-inch Newtonian once again. Here we go. So in the last video I talked a lot about this particular telescope, but I didn't really tell you much about it. So this particular telescope, yes, is a 10-inch Newtonian. And what does that actually mean? We've got two mirrors in here. We've got a secondary mirror here at the front and a primary mirror here at the back of it. So light comes in, hits the back, comes up to the front here. There's about a 90-degree mirror that then shoots it right into the camera here. It is a 1,000 millimeter or 1 meter focal length telescope, which means it looks marginally far, but not as big as some of the really large telescopes do. But a lot of people use small refractors, and those focal distances are going to range between probably 300 and 600 on average is probably going to be your most common. So with this big telescope, we're at f3.9, and for those of you that don't really know what that means either, it means it's really fast. We have a large aperture, so we can collect a lot of light, but this particular telescope is also going to render that light really quick. We do have a somewhat large field of view for looking at 1,000 millimeters of focal length, so we can take much shorter exposures than we need to. With my Explore Scientific 127 refractor, I was taking 10-minute long narrowband exposures, which is fairly long. You know, if a gust of wind hits it and vibrates it just enough, you're going to possibly lose that image. Or when Mr. Musk's satellites start streaking across the sky, those could go in and those could ruin a 10-minute long exposure. Tonight we're going to be doing 60-second RGB images and 5-minute long hydrogen alpha exposures. Once again, are going to be using the 2600mm. It's such a dynamic camera. Its APS-C size sensor is absolutely phenomenal when it comes to doing these shoots, for sure. So what does it actually mean to shoot HA RGB? If you've never seen it, it's actually pretty impressive. What we're going to do is we're going to get natural start colors. We're going to try to pick up any surrounding dust in that area with just regular broadband filters. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take HA or hydrogen alpha exposures with 3 nanometers. So what that's going to do is that's going to help cut out all light except for hydrogen. But then we're going to go an extra step further. We're going to then try and get hydrogen data. So what we'll do is we'll build our image with RGB data, and then we're going to add in hydrogen as a layer to that, and it's going to make this red kind of pinkish color really pop. A lot of people call this particular nebula the Phantom of the Opera Nebula. I don't really see the Phantom of the Opera, but I guess it looks close enough. So one of the questions that I'm often asked is, what is my favorite telescope? That's tough. I've told you guys, I love that flip flat that's on that Explore Scientific, but at the end of the day, this is the telescope that got me my NASA A-pod. This is the telescope that got me my first ZWO astronomy photo of the week. This is the telescope that I have had since I began doing this hobby. This was the first telescope that I purchased. Now with a telescope like this is not a portable setup in any way. It weighs about 45, 46 pounds, somewhere in there. It is very heavy. And it's because of that reason that I don't use it as much either. You know, you guys can actually see the scar here. I had elbow surgery literally just last year during the summer. So SH2-173, or again, the Phantom of the Opera Nebula, is an emission nebula in Cassiopeia, which again is going to be toward north, which works out really good for us because, as you see, we don't have any obstructions to our north or east other than the tree That's directly behind me, but that shouldn't be a problem tonight. And now the nebula itself is going to be so faint that just the RGB filters by themselves cannot pick up enough signal to truly capture this nebula. It will require the longer exposure at 5 minutes with hydrogen alpha filter to really bring out the details of this particular nebula. So estimates again put it at about 8,800 light years, but let's just call it 8,000 to 9,000 light years away from Earth. And it does span a diameter of a whopping 77 light years. Now, how do you even put something like that into perspective? It's kind of freaky when you think about it that our solar system, which we haven't even gotten a spacecraft out of, and our solar system is in the vicinity of 1 to 1.2 light years in total diameter that we're aware of. So 77 light years is incredibly massive, of course. But 5 years ago I bought this house and then met my wife, and she had moved in not too terribly long after that. And one of the big reasons why I bought this yard, and I'll put his picture up here, was because of my dog Bruno. You know, back in May we had to make the really tough decision to actually have him put down. A combination of age and just a number of health problems kicked up, and so now the house is a little bit more quiet, but that quietness is being quickly filled with the screaming of a baby. The baby actually is getting over RSV, or it's a respiratory virus. He did test negative for COVID, thankfully. So I actually got into this hobby because of my uncle. You know, I've always been fascinated with space and astronomy, and you know, when Apollo 13 came out as a young kid, you were like, oh my gosh, this is such a cool movie, but you know, little do you know how serious of an event something like that was. You know, you'll have conspiracy theorists out there that say the whole thing was fake, but you know, I refuse to believe that. The amount of people you'd have to pay off to keep something like that secretive would be pretty big. So it's probably just easier to do the actual event. You know, it was back in, I believe it was 2001 or 2002. I would have been in middle school at that point, and he invited us up here at the time to Smithville, which is just on the outskirts of Kansas City. It's not far off at all, to a friend's house. And this area is generally a Bortle 4 to Bortle 5 skies here. So he invited us up here to Smithville, and it was my first time ever seeing Jupiter and Saturn through a telescope. And it was pretty incredible to actually see it. And I still have his telescope now after he had passed away. It was because I had his telescope when COVID hit. I just came out in the backyard one night. I had the DSLR camera, and I looked up. I remember over here to the southwest, April time frame, and I remember seeing Orion's belt. Right, everybody knows Orion's belt. But then I took pictures of it, and then in the pictures I started seeing, and I didn't know it at the time, but it was the Orion Nebula. And I started thinking, wow, this is actually pretty cool. What else can I see? I tried to do the Crab Nebula. That didn't pan out. I didn't have anywhere near the focal length to do something like that. I started looking up new targets, figuring out what kind of telescope do you need? What kind of parts do you need? What do you need to make this hobby happen? And, you know, actually, I remember having a call with High Point Scientific's Dave Barrett. Dave was amazing. You know, it was probably a 30-minute discussion about telescopes and just what can you do, what kind of things you can image. And I remember at the time, he told me that he was able to take galaxy photos with his, I believe it was 385, and he had really walked me through just a lot of what you need when it came to like prime focus and whatnot. So you know, I got all the pieces I needed, and then I slowly started acquiring pieces, you know, one at a time, and started upgrading little parts here and there. And then I started thinking about, well, what kind of telescope do I actually want? So I feel like I need to do a whole video on what kind of telescope you should get, because this hobby really blew up in a hurry. You know, I remember when I started, you know, the first people that I watched was Trevor and Chuck and Nico, and those were kind of the guys that I had watched trying to figure out how to do this, because at the time those were really the only people doing this. And then, you know, I met some guys that I talk to still to this day, almost every single day, with Tommy and Steven, and you know, we collaborate a lot with techniques and telescopes and experiences and what are you shooting, and we talk all the time. So a lot of this hobby isn't just setting up the telescope and then going to bed and waking up to see what you get. A lot of it's the collaboration. I do post my images on Facebook. I post them on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok and YouTube, and I do all of this, and it's really just to make sure I'm sharing what I'm getting, and the effect that maybe you want to ask me questions. Maybe you want to ask me, how do you do something? You know, again, I've used every single telescope that you can buy that doesn't cost $10,000. Okay, so, you know, I don't want to make this too terribly long at this point. Thanks for sticking with us for now. If you're subscribed to the channel, I want to send out a special thank you. If you're new to the channel, definitely subscribe. That way you can see more videos like this. Here in just a second, I'm going to go ahead and throw up the photo that we captured tonight. So thank you again for joining us, guys. I appreciate all of you. Be sure to go down in the comments below. Ask me questions. Let me know if you like this. Let me know if there's something in particular that you would like to see or something that you'd like me to talk about. By all means, I'm happy to help. So until next time, guys, clear skies, and thanks for joining.